Welcome. Welcome after that incredible performance this morning. So, ladies and gentlemen, family, because we are all family in the BC Liberal Party, we are here today to answer your questions. We have made open government a real hallmark of the things we want to do. We're talking about families, job creation, and opening up government. So over the last 2 months, since I've been Premier, sometimes it feels like it's longer, sometimes it feels like it was shorter than that. We've done 2 completely open town halls, one in Fort St. John, one in Richmond. I've done a town hall in Vancouver Point Grey. We've done telephone town halls across the province. Blair and Kevin and Pat Bell have hosted town halls on the HST that have included the participation of over 200,000 British Columbians. And that's all about being open with you and listening to citizens. But, as I often say, you don't join a political party unless you feel like you get to have a say. That's one of the privileges of being a BC Liberal. So now is your chance to have a say. Your chance to talk about the things that are important to you. Your chance to ask questions, make suggestions to our cabinet. I have behind me here an incredibly strong, talented group of people. And I believe as a basic management principle that if you want to end with openness, if you want to be open with citizens, if you want to allow citizens more say, you have to start with it. So as a management principle, what I do is I allow each of these incredibly bright and talented people to do their jobs, to bring their best to the table, to take some risks, to be creative, to make decisions, and really spread their wings the way that they all do. And in doing so, they make great decisions for British Columbia. So what we'll hear today, I'm going to invite each of you to get up and ask any question you want, and we'll allow the appropriate minister to answer it. They may want to involve their parliamentary secretary in answering the questions where appropriate. I certainly welcome them to do that today as well. So ladies and gentlemen, BC Liberals, family, let's get started. Who wants to go first?
George, keep your hand down.
All right.
Way to go, Christy.
Oh, hi, good morning. This is Jack Seacon. My question is for Kevin Falcon.
All right, Kevin.
It's not to put him on the hot seat here, but again, we hear a lot of philosophical comments. We hear a lot of policy generic statements. My question is, if he wants to make a difference tomorrow morning for one thing, what's that one thing would be?
Free beer in the ladies' Now you got it.
This is a tough question.
Everyone's...
The Canucks win tomorrow.
Yeah. The Canucks win tomorrow night.
Take your time, Kevin.
I'd like to share a moment of the evening I had last night with all of you. It was at a place I've never heard of called the Mule, and I was there with many of our close and dearest friends. Thank you, all of you that joined us there. It was a lot of fun. I would like to ensure that in the future there is a restriction for MLAs and ministers that we are kept within these building grounds here and then sent home immediately to bed once our official duties come to an end. No. Look, it's a great question, Jack. I think there's a lot of issues. The one issue that has always driven us as a government is making sure we have a strong economy. And the reason it's, a lot of people say, oh, you're obsessed with the economy. What about all the other issues we care for? It's not that we don't care a lot and passionately about all the issues like education and healthcare and delivering the best possible services. But we've never lost sight of the fact that unless we get the economy right, and unless we create an economy and a confidence level in the public of British Columbia that is going to generate economic activity, confidence, job creation. That's going to generate the revenues we need to be able to do all the things that really all of us run for public life to do. And I have to tell you, the biggest short-term challenge and one of my fondest wishes is actually that the HST, which we did admittedly a really terrible job of introducing and not explaining, but what I hope is that it doesn't fail on the altar of that bad introduction and poor explanation, because I really believe, really deep in my heart, that that is absolutely the right thing for the future of the province of British Columbia. And I hope that we will go out and do what we're doing, which is listen to British Columbians, answer questions, be honest, don't oversell it, give people the facts, and I hope that if we do that, that the public will look at it and judge it on the basis of fairness and looking at both the good and the bad, because it's not all positive. There's good and bad, but I hope that we can do a good job of that, and I think we've started that process, and I do really honestly believe that in terms of supporting and generating economic activities and revenues the government will need in the future to support an aging population, that's the one thing I'd really like to see us get right. So thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. You know, of course, when we do this in question period, you're supposed to make your answer as long as you possibly can, so that they don't get any, the NDP don't get any more questions. But of course, we are not facing New Democrats here today, so let's try and keep our answers a little shorter if we can. Thank you, Kevin.
That
although
goes back to my evening I had.
I appreciate you needed some time to get your head around that one. Dan from the island.
Thank you, Premier, and thank you for the party last night. And I really much like the theme, we are family. Holistic principles, everything is connected. 203 First Nation communities in British Columbia, 176 community neighbors, non-Aboriginal communities, and we are involved in negotiations with both Canada and British Columbia. The theme on family, and I just want to emphasize the need for each of the ministries and to be involved because it's all interconnected. Each one of the ministries has a responsibility to all of the people, to the First Nations as well. So what can we do as a family to make sure that we have fair treaties, fair negotiations, but more importantly, there's been two studies, one by the International Indigenous Living Tongues and a National Geographic. And there was another study in 2005 that linked language to suicide in First Nation communities. So we need to enhance the language for the children in the Indigenous children in the schools. And so we need to also re-educate the population with respect to Indigenous peoples in British Columbia itself. So how can we together facilitate and expedite the negotiations here in a fair way and recognizing title and rights, but also recognizing the need for Aboriginal children to be protected and their language to be preserved? Thank you for that, Dan. And of course, every ministry in this government is a family serving ministry, however you define family. And our First Nation Aboriginal Reconciliation Minister is a former Minister of Children and Families for a very significant reason. So Mary Polak.
Thank you. And thanks, Dan, for asking a question for which, of course, there's a very short answer. This is something very close to my heart, and I want to tell you, first of all, in terms of looking at this holistically, I'm very excited about the work that in my ministry, in Aboriginal Relations and Reconciliation, that we're doing together with the Ministry of Children and Family Development and Minister McNeil, in particular up in the Stikine in the northwest of British Columbia. We are doing some exciting new things around negotiation that involve a completely holistic look, taking a look at the family agenda first before we get to looking at all the land and title issues and making sure that it's all connected. And I want to say the First Nations up there, the Kaska, the Tahltan, the Taka River Tlingit, have just been amazing in how they've embraced that. That's first off. Languages, I will also add one more thing. And for people who don't know, we are in danger in British Columbia of seeing many of our First Nation languages go extinct within the next very short number of years, maybe even as little as 10 years. That's going to take some work together, not only on the part of government, but on the part of communities and the part of nonprofits who are working together with us. It's a hugely critical issue. Lastly, I think we all have to start thinking about the importance of Aboriginal people in British Columbia becoming part of the mainstream economy and becoming part of our mainstream communities. This isn't something we can any longer look at and hive off and say, well, that's Aboriginal. This is about all of us. It's about all of our history, and it's also about all of our futures. And we all have families, Aboriginal, non-Aboriginal, and we all need to be looking at that in the holistic way that Dan has described. Thanks.
I think George would like to, as an education minister, would like to add to that too.
Sure. I think it's important to say a few things, and thank you, Dan, for the question. I think, all British Columbians should feel as I do, as an education minister, somewhere between embarrassed and ashamed at how poorly our education system has served Aboriginal First Nations kids over many years. We're working through, I think, a legacy of 150 years of bad public policy, particularly, the period in the late 1800s, very, very poor in terms of public policy, and we're still, I think, trying as a society to move to inclusion and opportunity for First Nations, and education, I think, is a big part of that. I think we really should be taking a lot more pride in the extraordinary legacy of Aboriginal languages, the heritage, Aboriginal art, all of that area we should take, I think, a whole lot more pride in throughout the school system, and ensure that First Nations students feel very proud of the heritage they have. I think the other thing is we really need to improve on what is currently the 51% graduation rate for Aboriginal students in the province. I think we need to start at kindergarten in terms of trying to ensure that all the foundation pieces are in place for Aboriginal students as they should be for all students in the province. So there's much that needs to be done, and I think education is an important part, along with health and economic development and all the other areas of cabinet responsibility to ensuring that in the 21st century that Aboriginal kids have all of the opportunities that every child in this province should have.
Thanks, George. Microphone 2.
Randy McLean, town of Princeton. I come from a community that's very lucky to have a mine opening up, but I refer back to a few months ago talking to a ministry official who we were discussing the removal of the last of our 3 forestry workers when we have a sawmill in Princeton, a huge economic driver in the town of Princeton. He asked me, you need to talk to the province and ask them what their rural strategy is. And from my point of view, and I think this would be through to you, Premier Clark, I absolutely believe Family First is a platform that is going to drive us to victory in the next provincial election. But I also believe that small rural communities need to be, that strategy for small rural communities, for our rural BC, needs to be addressed in order to be included in that Family First platform.
Thank you, Randy. I couldn't agree with you more. And this is the connection between families, and Kevin's drawn it as well. I've drawn it. The reason we talk about the economy, the reason that I talk about the economy and families together, is because we need to remind British Columbians that there is a connection. The economy does not exist as an abstract set of statistics that are published by the federal government every month to tell us how well we're doing. The economy exists to create and provide jobs for all of us and all the people in our communities. Because when we are working, we are creating and sustaining healthy families. When you can take home a paycheck, you are a far better parent than you are if you can't. And we need to remember our economic strength is about our communities and it's about strong families. So when I talk about families first, that's exactly what I mean. And where is our economy founded in British Columbia? What feeds and clothes us in this province for the most part still? It's rural economies. It's forestry, it's mining, it's everything that happens in the outback, it's oil and gas. All of the resource industries are what sustain us. We have an urban economy, we have an innovative economy, we have an information economy, but we cannot forget about the importance of rural British Columbia in our economic strategy. And that is one of the central tenets of what we're trying to do in making sure that we are freeing up investment and helping you create economic activity all across the province. Because when there's economic activity in the Peace or in Smithers, when there's economic activity in Penticton, it means we're able to pay for hard operations in Vancouver and special needs teachers in schools in Victoria. That's what it means. So I've put Pat Bell to work as our jobs minister, specifically tasked with trying to think about how we are going to unleash more economic activity across the province in urban and rural British Columbia. It's not something you can do that you can finish doing in just 2 months, but we've started working hard on it. And we're hopeful that in the very, very near future, we're going to be able to talk a little bit more publicly about it because it has been absolutely the very first priority of this government. Pat Bell.
Hey, Pat. Well, thanks, Randy. You know, we need to do things differently. Historically, governments have followed a very specific model around economic development, and we've all gotten exactly the same results. And I think, and Christy has asked me to put a different lens on our approach to economic development in the province. In the next 4, 5, 6 weeks, we're going to be announcing a change that I would describe as seismic. It will be a completely new approach that will acknowledge and recognize the importance of small rural economies across the province, but it will also look to make sure that we can capitalize on the incredible talent that we have in the mainstream urban economies as well. So we're looking throughout all of the different industrial sectors right now to figure out what our best opportunities are. Take the core principles behind focusing on your strengths, making sure you take what you do well and do it better than anyone else in the world. We sit on the corner of the Asia Pacific. We are the only Canadian province that is on the Pacific Ocean. We are the jurisdiction that is most suited to developing strong economic ties with China, with India, with Japan, with Korea, with Vietnam. And as many of you know, I've spent a lot of time in the Asia Pacific over the last 3 years or so. So I'm really excited about the direction that Christy has given me. I think we have enormous opportunity, and we can take what happened in Mackenzie over the last 3 years, replicate it across the province. We'll get incredible results. I'm looking forward to being part of that.
Thank you, Pat. Good morning.
Morning. John Becker, Pitt Meadows, Maple Ridge. A question for the Minister of Finance. Everything's about finance, of course. Thank you still for the Pitt River Bridge. Much appreciated. And the Golden Ears Bridge, which was TransLink, but you should take credit for that as well. You meant families. I'm going to stretch the analogy a bit. We're a family of governments here in British Columbia, federal, provincial, and less in the shallow end on the local government and with a limited tax base. This government, to its credit, has invested billions of dollars into infrastructure. Much of that impacts on connections within the municipalities. And it's very difficult for municipalities, ours certainly, to budget to connect those infrastructure improvements that come from the province when much of our budgeting is done on the basis of government grants. I describe it, we're budgeting on a lottery win, a government program will come down. Is there any way or any thought, or what are your thoughts on the notion of coming up with a 30-cent dollar model for local governments saying that, well, we as a province prudently don't have the money for this now, but if you can partner with the private sector and bring a third in from your local, perhaps we could move up those infrastructure connections to 2020 or 2015 instead of leaving them out for 2030. It would also facilitate, of course, the budgeting process if we know that if we work with the private sector and our local taxpayers and our provincial government, it's a more logical budgeting process than the God only knows, I hope we get a grant program. Just your thoughts on that.
Well, you know, certainly I think we're always open to having a discussion about how we can try and improve things. I like the idea of certainly encouraging participation with the private sector. I think that can only be a positive thing. It's something we've tried to demonstrate at the provincial level with our partnerships with the private sector that have been enormously successful in helping deliver large, complex projects on schedule, on budget. But you know, you and I should have a little chat afterwards, and I think we could probably delve a little deeper into your suggestion and see what we can do to try and improve things.
Buell, 1 a.m., you and me.
Thanks, John. Never again, he says. Go ahead.
David Frederickson, Delta South. My question is for Health Minister Mike de Jong. Mike, you have been both Solicitor General and Attorney General in your illustrious cabinet career. In those positions, you oversaw the Provincial Review Board, which determines when and on what conditions people who have been acquitted or found not guilty by way of reduced capacity, that is, not criminally responsible as a result of a mental defect. And the conditions can include, of course, an escorted day pass. You're now Minister of Health, and I believe that one of your responsibilities as Minister of Health is to foster a better understanding of mental illness in our community and to advocate on behalf of those people who have mental illnesses. Many families have had to deal with serious mental illness. My family has. My question to you relates to the tenor and tone of the debate that followed the decision to release Mr. Schoenborn, Alan Schoenborn, on a day pass. Statistics that I've reviewed indicate that there's not a single incident reported in all of Canada since people have been released on supervised day passes where an incidence of violence has occurred by someone who has been supervised. My question to you is, with your unique perspective as having supervised the Provincial Review Board and now being Minister of Mental Health, were you troubled, as I was greatly, by the very one-sided nature and tone of the debate? Everybody recognizes that the acts committed by Mr. Schoenborn were horrible and it was tragic. But I believe that the tenor of the debate and the tone of the debate and how one-sided it was reflects a basic misunderstanding of mental illness. That's my question to you.
Thanks. You've broached an emotionally charged issue. I don't have any additional information than you would have about, and I'm reluctant to comment about a specific case. I think people were confused about how someone who a year or two ago was determined to be in a particular state of mind might be released without posing what many people thought would be a threat. I can't talk about that. I don't know what was in the minds of the people that made the determination. I know the Attorney General has posed some questions as well. So I will answer in a more general way. The stigma attached to mental illness and the lack of understanding that accrues around the questions of mental illness remains. And though when I sit here with 3 or 4 former health ministers, I got the job, I said to the Premier, I feel a little bit like Zsa Zsa Gabor on her wedding night. I know what's expected of me. I'm not sure I can make it interesting. We are spending exponentially more money on mental health related issues than ever before. And yet, at a time, I tried this and the other, when we became government, the health budget was about roughly $9 billion. How much is it today, folks? Oh, you're not bad, yeah. 17.5, closing on $18 billion. The stigma, the need for additional resources remains, and yet we have to balance our desire to provide those additional resources with the capacity of people in this room and around the province to pay. We just made an announcement recently about a new facility in Lions Gate. I congratulate the MLAs and the people of the North Shore who lobbied long and hard to make that happen, but we got a lot of work to do. And you have identified an issue that remains a vexing one for this government, and it will continue to be an important one.
Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Christy, I'd like to comment on that just a little bit as well, because I was quite involved.
Now, there's a shocker.
Quite involved in this matter as Attorney General, and the case you're referring to involved a fellow named Ellen Schoenborn, I believe. And yes, there was considerable public interest and angst, and I think there are two underlying currents. One was that many members of the public felt that they had heard, even though they hadn't, but they thought they understood that Mr. Schoenborn had actually been released. And in fact, the review board recommended that he be detained, ordered that he be detained, but delegated the decision-making authority to the treating psychiatrist at Colony Farms the option of allowing him temporary escorted absence sometime in the next 12 months, but only if the treating psychiatrist determined that his mental state had stabilized to such an extent that an escorted absence for a few hours wouldn't pose an undue risk to the public. That was the decision, but I think many members of the public didn't quite hear it that way. They heard that he had been released, or at least that's what they thought they'd heard. I had people stop me on the street and tell me that that's what they believed had actually happened. And then the other underlying current, I think, is that many people just don't believe that Mr. Schoenborn actually was mentally ill sufficiently at the time that he committed those horrendous offenses to actually qualify him for being found not criminally responsible by way of a mental illness. And I think there is a large current in the population that just doesn't accept that that's a reason not to be held criminally responsible. But for more than 200 years in our parliamentary system or in the Commonwealth, it's been recognized that if you're so sufficiently mentally ill as not to appreciate the nature and quality of your acts, then you're not to be determined to be criminally responsible, because the key element of a criminal conviction is mens rea, the mental element. And if you don't have the mental element, then in our justice system you can't be found criminally responsible, but you can still be detained to protect the public. So looking at what happened, and after talking to the mother of the 3 children, I met with her in their kitchen for a few hours. I am satisfied that they have good reason to be concerned about Mr. Schoenborn still, and I think that within the protections of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms and understanding that mental illness is a serious issue, there still is some room to straighten out some of the provisions in the criminal code, 672 of the criminal code in particular, to give greater protection to victims and the public, and give them a greater sense of security while still protecting those that have a mental illness.
Thank you, Barry. Matthew.
Hi, Matt Naylor. I'm from Vancouver, Mount Pleasant. This is an exciting time in intergovernmental relations right now with the passage of the New West Partnership Agreement. And my question is to the Minister responsible for intergovernmental affairs. Is there a prospect for that type of agreement to be expanded across the province? I realize that there has been problems with the implementation on the Agreement on Internal Trade. And so the binding system that is being implemented in Tilma and then New West represents a significantly better form of an interprovincial trade agreement. So is that going to be expanded? Is there a chance that we'll be able to, export our goods more broadly across the country? And on the flip side of that is how can we make sure that those type of trade agreements don't become a regulatory race to the bottom?
Thanks, Matt. I have met with Brad Stelmach, or Brad Wall and Ed Stelmach recently to talk about our newest partnership, which has been, by the way, a great success for all of us. $25 million in the healthcare system, just for example, in some of the savings we've been able to find with group purchasing. The price of pacemakers has dropped by a third, for example, because of the purchasing that we do as well. So there are, and those are just a couple of examples of the success that we find when we get together and we try and find economies of scale. So it's been a real success for us. It is in its early stages. We haven't realized all the savings, anywhere near the savings that we're going to get from it, I believe, that we will soon. Premier Selinger of Manitoba has made a request to be a part of the New West partnership. So, and I met with him recently as well. And you know, here's the thing. We want to expand the partnership because we want to have bigger economies of scale. But we want to make sure that when we expand it, we are keeping the integrity of what we've brought together in the first place. Because the strength of the partnership is very much that there aren't a whole lot of conditions on it. We are treating, for the first time in Canada like it's a country. And at least, you know, we're trying to knock down those interprovincial trade barriers between provinces that are such a drag on our productivity and that really cost us all as taxpayers a lot of money. So we're trying to knock down those trade barriers. It means change. In some cases, it doesn't make everybody happy. And we would very much like to expand the partnership in doing that. But Matt, just, you know, the caveat that I would add is I would rather have it limited to 3 provinces and have it be really free trade between us than start expanding it to 4, 5, 6, and 7 and start making it look less like actual free trade. That's the strength of it. And you know, the next step for the New West partnership that we're talking about is how do we build our partnership further and look to the West? How do we build our partnership as we go to China and India and Korea and Japan? How do we take what we have and market all of our provinces together and all the things that we do, all the strengths that we have in Asia as one united force? So we have 2 jobs, one internally in our country and one to bring us all together and make sure that we are maximizing those opportunities that we see across the Pacific Ocean because they are huge. We are Canada's West Coast. It is us. And Premiers Wall and Stelmach will say, this is their coast too, and indeed it is. But we have the responsibility to lead. And so that's what we're doing with the New West partnership. And we have, you know, I think we have a lot more to accomplish and huge benefits when we knock down those trade barriers and get a chance to realize the real potential of this country when we work together. Thank you, Matthew. Microphone 2. Go Canucks.
Hey, thank you very much. John Cave, West Vancouver, Capilano, and this is regards to all of us here with family. My daughter Christy, a great name with a K, but you know, works well. Property transfer tax. My daughter, if she's looking at buying a home, will take the property transfer tax, take it into a mortgage, will pay that mortgage off over 25 years. Property transfer tax then becomes whatever amount times 2 into the end of it. There's about $1 billion, I believe, a year that comes into the economy from property transfer taxes. In the last 2 weeks on our street in West Vancouver, 5 homes have been sold over $300,000 asking price. The homes, it looked like the MCL parking lot. The cars were just incredible. Every BMW, whatever bigger, they just got bigger and bigger each day. The buyers were all offshore. All 5 homes were bought from offshore buyers. Their intention, other than one of them, is not to rent the houses out and not to occupy them, but strictly to have this as an offshore asset that they can have because they don't like the US dollars and they figure, well, let's put it into good Canadian property. I would like to see the cabinet, and like several American states have done, remove the property transfer tax from my daughter and from Sandeep over here, where they can afford to buy a house, although they'll never probably buy in West Vancouver because the prices are just gone crazy. And I would like to see that transferred over, the property transfer tax, offshore buyers to 20 or 30%. That would bring in the $1 billion that we're going to lose if we phase out the general property transfer tax.
And you know, before we decide we want to get rid of the property transfer tax, we need to rename it. We need to call it what it really is, which is the Bill Vander Zalm tax. You got more? No? Okay.
Nope.
Kevin, do you want to take it?
Well, I think a couple of things spring to my mind. First of all, I think there's a legal question that I would have to get some clarity on about the discriminatory approach of whether you could relieve British Columbians of a tax and then charge it to others.
I'm saying all Canadians, all Canadians would not be paying the property transfer tax, but offshore non-residents.
But any non-residents, yeah. And so I'd have to think about that in terms of our international agreements, NAFTA and other things. So I'd have to give that some thought, and I'd have to secure some legal advice, because I'm not sure it's as simple as you might be suggesting, because remember, everything we do has the potential to have equal rebounding effect against ourselves, right? So we have to make sure that all the investment that we want to come into the province, if we decide to treat it differently here, then it can have the effect of having the exact same thing happen when we try to invest elsewhere. So I'm not suggesting that it's a poor idea, just something that I think I'd have to give a little more thought to. But thank you for the idea.
Good morning.
Good morning, Premier. Thank you so much for giving us this opportunity to address the Cabinet. It's really a pleasure to do this. As a lifelong British Columbian, I want you to know that I lived through the dark ages in the 90s. And talk about families. I had 4 nephews that left British Columbia and 3 nieces that left British Columbia. They're not back. I have 12 grandchildren and 2 great-grandchildren, and I want you to know I don't want them to leave British Columbia either. I'm from the East Kootenay. I've been actively involved throughout my life in environmental and other issues. One of the biggest problems that we have in rural British Columbia is access to resources, because we continue to destroy resource roads for whatever reason that may be. Without access, we have nothing. Our East Kootenay has 5 open cast coal mines. They bring in between $3 to $4 billion a year. When I see those coal trains going down the track, I think of hip replacements and heart transplants and those sorts of things. That's where it comes from in British Columbia. I want you to know too that rural British Columbians provide 80% of the wealth in this province, and urban British Columbia spends 80% of the wealth that we earn. I want you to know too that there are thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of us that went through CORE under the Owen Commission in the Kootenays. Is that I called it conflict over resource extraction. That conflict over resource extraction is present today. We have to, as a government, go after the federal government. We don't need three assessments on places like the Prosperity Mine. We have to go. We have to go to them, not with our hat in hand, but tell them that this is British Columbia. We are responsible. We have some of the best regulations in the world, and we can and we do look after environment. The environment isn't very good without wealth. If we don't have wealth, we have no environment. If we do have wealth and use it properly, we then can keep our families together in British Columbia. I want this Cabinet to look at the Rural Resource Roads Act and make it happen so that we can again go back into experiencing the freedom that we had in rural British Columbia. And I'm not just talking about me as a hunter, fisherman, trapper, a guy who prospects, a guy who skidoos and quads. I do all of those things, and I do them all with my grandchildren. I want you to know that I'm not alone there. There's berry pickers, there's mushroom pickers, there's rock hounders. Companies, I formed a new group called Access British Columbia, and I put an asterisk beside that because I know I can't use that name, but I use it anyway. And I want you to know we want access, and major companies want access to the resources. So I want you, and I really appreciate this opportunity to talk to you all about our concerns. In a little over a year, I have close to 5,000 members in Access British Columbia and the Kootenays, and they're coming in from Alberta and Saskatchewan too. And we want to see how you can flip an NDP province into a healthy, wealthy 10th place to first look at Saskatchewan. They must have did something right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm going to hand that over to Steve, but on the first question, just let me say, I have talked to the Prime Minister about this issue of harmonizing our environmental review process. It is a ridiculously onerous process. It has to be a process that works. It has to be a process that protects our environment. It has to make sure that we are respecting the land and the future of our kids and making sure we are good stewards. But we also have to make sure that it's a process that's fair, that's much quicker, that's much more reasonable, and that isn't ridiculously onerous, because part of a good environment, as you say, is a healthy economy. So I've talked to him about it. Now that there is a majority government for 4 years in Ottawa, I think we have a chance to really get into some much deeper conversations about some of the things that we want for British Columbia, and we intend to do that. I'm going to hand this over to Steve to speak to the issue of access roads.
Okay. Thanks, Premier, and thanks, Carmen, for the question. And firstly, just to thank you again for raising the importance of the resource industries to British Columbia. I think you made that point very, very clear, and myself and the other ministers that deal with the resources throughout Cabinet recognize the importance of that. So the issue of access to Crown lands, 94% of our land in British Columbia is Crown lands. I recognize the importance of those roads to get that access for guide outfitters, for trappers, for all that you mentioned. Bill Bennett has done a lot of work on the Resource Roads Act and this issue. We've agreed that we're going to work together and take a look at it, and we'll be reviewing the policy, bringing something forward. The big question, I think, is what's the nature of the management, the administration of those roads after the resource industry or the resource companies, forestry mostly, have completed their work, and those roads are decommissioned, because at that point they're responsible for the maintenance and liability up to that point. You obviously don't want to continue to have them maintain that liability, so we have to sort through that part of it. But Bill has done a lot of work on it. I've asked Bill to continue to take a look at it, and he and I are going to look at how we bring this issue forward.
Thank you, Steve. Good morning.
Morning. It's Craig Mearns, Saanich North on the Islands. I've got a number of issues, but I'm just going to deal with the one that really concerns people on Vancouver Island the most, and that is the ferries. And as you know, the ferries have a long history with Vancouver Island, and there are main access and transportation method. And years ago, your government, when you first got elected, you changed the system where it was a government organization, and you made it into a semi-private organization. And we've seen some of the benefits of that with the improvement in the service, which is good. But what's happening in the last few years is the people in Vancouver Island are very, very concerned with the costs that are going up to the individual for using that service. And we get the feeling that the government has just kind of washed their hands of it and letting the corporation deal with it, and that's what they're supposed to do. And I guess that's epitomized by the recent decision by the president or chairman of the board to, after a period of time when people have bought these advance
assured loading
issues that he's basically canceling them after a period of time. And the assured loading thing is used by a lot of people that are business people that are supporters and members, and they're also purchased by older people who don't want to stay in those lines for long periods of time, so they don't use them in a short period of time. They may use them over a 4 or 5 year period. And I would like to see your government first of all, take a hard look at some of these rates. The people on Vancouver Island on the main rates, on the Victoria and the Nanaimo runs, are paying more than their share. They're paying. I believe those runs run profitably, at least they used to. And I really want to see you basically tell them to back off on that assured loading thing, and because there's a class action suit been started on that by the public, and I just don't think we should be fighting with the public on an issue like that.
Thank you for that. BC Ferries, BC Hydro, ICBC, there are a lot of costs that are imposed by agencies, what are ultimately agencies of government on families. And so when we as a government say we care about making sure that it's a little bit easier for families to get ahead, however you define your family, whether it's your kids, whether it's your parents, your grandparents, your grandchildren, your brothers, sisters, however you define it, we need to make sure that we are keeping the cost that government imposes on you, the aggregate cost on you, as low as we possibly can. And so we're paying a lot of attention to that. As you know, Rich Coleman is working on a review with BC Hydro, and I'm going to hand the question on BC Ferries over to Blair Leckstrom, our Minister of Transportation.
Right. Well, thanks, Premier, and I understand if they're a concern for you, I can tell you I share that concern. It's an interesting situation we have. We made a decision, I think it was back in 2003, Kevin, and I'll look to you. We made some changes under BC Ferries. And, you know, there's obviously been some unintended consequences, I believe. We have an independent ferry commissioner that right now I encourage everybody to participate. The next year's increases, obviously the 4-year terms, are out there for consideration. They came in at 4.15% and 8.23% respective increases. The 8.23 on the northern and minor routes. That's per year for 4 years. And that, although is a lesser number than what was originally floated, is a big concern, not only for myself, but I think for most people, the users on the island, as well as British Columbians. We have to have the ability to actually look at what's going on out there. You know, we hand over some of the work and the day-to-day operations of these to try and make sure that we have great service, that we have a considerable amount of customer satisfaction in these. But the challenge is that when something goes sideways, traditionally it's the people look to government, and rightfully so. So my commitment to you is I accept the fact that we have to, if we are responsible for our legislation. I don't blame BC Ferries like many people. We have a piece of legislation, to be honest with you, that they work to. If the time is there, and in most jurisdictions that use the type of format that we do in British Columbia, usually every so many years there will be a review to see if it's working properly. I'm working on that right now, the assured loading tickets. I have had discussions. Again, that's not a decision the government made, but BC Ferries. I share that concern. It's $1.2 million that was removed from the pockets of British Columbians. The key issue for me, service has to be good, but at the bottom of, or at the end of the day, it has to be affordable. You and I and our families have to be able to utilize this as part of our transportation network, not on a basis of being free, but on a basis of being affordable and family friendly. My commitment to you, and this is probably getting a little long in the answer.
It is.
Get there?
Yeah.
I wanted to try and copy everybody else, but I'm going to have to cut it short. We're going to do something. We're going to do the best we can. We're going to make sure that our ferry system not only is the best in the world, but affordable and sustainable.
All right. Thank you, Blair.
We are running out of time, and so we're extending the session to accommodate the people who are at the mics now. We would ask that no one else step up to the mic, and that those who are there try and keep their questions as short as possible. Thanks.
Anybody ever listen to Peter Warren on CKNW? Remember what he used to say when people would go on too long? Get on with it. So that's what we're going to do now. Microphone 1.
Hi, thank you. Colin Rogers from the beautiful community of Chilliwack. I'm going to direct my question to Barry Penner, our Attorney General, and the MLA I got to vote for in the last election. But I also invite and maybe even encourage the Premier and our most recently elected MLA in the caucus to also comment. My question is about fixed election dates and the potential of a earlier election than 2013. I'd like to address both the why and the how that we can have an election earlier than 2013.
That is a good question. I get asked that sometimes by members of the press gallery, including people that are sitting just a few rows from the stage here. You'll recall that when our government ran on a platform to put in set election dates back in 2001, some people said, well, how can you do that constitutionally in a parliamentary system? How can you fetter the discretion of the Queen or the Queen's representative to dissolve the legislature when that representative sees fit? And the answer is you can't in a parliamentary system. But what our set election date says that every 4 years the head of the elected government shall go and seek to have the legislature dissolved by going to meet with the, in our case, the Lieutenant Governor. There's similar legislation out at the federal level requiring the Prime Minister to go and speak to the Governor General every 4 years to seek to have the Parliament dissolved. But that doesn't take away the discretion of the Lieutenant Governor in the case of the province or the Governor General at the federal level to dissolve Parliament or the legislature earlier as they see fit. And so the act that we passed merely says that the elected person needs to go at least every 4 years to go seek that dissolution of the legislature, but doesn't prevent the elected head of government from seeking that earlier and having the Lieutenant Governor make that decision earlier.
So that's the how. The why. When I ran for leader over the 90 days that I was running, I was asked this question a lot. And I said, look, if I should be selected as leader of the BC Liberal Party and Premier of British Columbia, I will be selected by BC Liberals who paid for $10 for the privilege of voting to select the Premier. That isn't a mandate from the people of British Columbia. And I think as part of being an open government, we do have a responsibility to go seek a mandate from British Columbians sooner than the fixed election date might say. So I don't know. We don't know when the election might be, but it will likely be before the election date that's currently fixed. If it is, we will set the next fixed election date on that date or from that date. So we'll go right back to fixed election dates. Jeff Plant, who was the architect of the fixed election date legislation when I was there in 2001 or 2002 when he brought it in, I think, said, you know, our legislation never contemplated that we would have an unelected premier for 2 or more years in this province. And so we're in an unusual circumstance. And I would very much like to go and get a mandate from the citizens of British Columbia, a mandate that's a stamp, a mandate that is a clear voice and a vote for change in the province, the kind of change that we all want, not the kind of change that the NDP is offering for people, the kind of change that we've been talking about. I think we need to go and get that mandate. We will likely go and get it sooner before we get to the fixed election date, but as I said, we will set the next fixed election date from the day that it's called. Microphone 2.
CJ Sidhu from North Delta. So my question is twofold. And first of all, thank you, Premier, for providing this platform and a forum where, as a family, we can express our concerns and questions. When we go back door knocking in election time, we can tell people that our party really listens to their members. So having said that, my first question is in regards to ethnic communities, in specific South Asian community. So there is a lot of issues. Either it will be new immigrants, either that can be English as a second language, can be a specific health issues, or it can be a transportation industry where trucking and taxi drivers feel certain policies, not for safety reasons, but for like not filling out a form properly, or they're missing information and pulling their licenses. So we have to address those issues, how we do that, how we reach out to these communities so they feel involved and bring a part of our family. That's number one. Number two is in regards to the unions. When teachers union or health employees union, there should be certain rules that they don't go out through the parents or students spreading a misinformation and causing a lot of issues, and NDP using that as their platform. There should be some rules to regard that. Can you please address these two issues? Thank you.
Thank you for that, CJ. Thank you for both. I'll try and answer them both very quickly. The first one, the South Asian community is a really important part of our BC Liberal family, and it's also a really important part of our society here in British Columbia. India has the fastest growing middle class anywhere on the globe. And what an incredible opportunity we have with such a strong South Asian community here to make those connections with India and really build on our economic opportunities there. I think it's huge for us. So I will be creating a South Asian Advisory Council that's coming together. We're working on that now to make sure that some of the issues that you've raised come directly to me, so that we can make sure that people in the community know we are listening to their concerns. Second, I was very publicly when this whole issue of whether or not the teachers union could send home propaganda with kids in their backpacks was a big one, and it ended up going to arbitration, as you know. And back when I was on radio, I talked a lot about it because I didn't think it was appropriate. But it went to arbitration. The arbitrator decided that the teachers had the right to be able to do that. And so, whether or not there are other opportunities to be able to affect those kinds of decisions in the future, I don't know, CJ. But at the moment, that's the outcome of that decision, and government needs to be bound by that outcome. I do think, though, classrooms aren't a place for politics. Classrooms are a place for kids to learn, and I really believe. I really believe that we have to make sure, and I know that George believes this too, that schools are not about what adults need. Schools have to be about what kids need. And that's a big change, I think, for lots of people who work and live and have been a part of the system over the years. And I'm really delighted that George Abbott has been building such a positive relationship with the people who work every day in schools. My dad was a teacher, and he worked his heart out for the kids that he worked with, because he knew that it was about the kids and it wasn't about him. George Abbott is building a relationship with the people who work in classrooms so that we can make sure we have the kind of relationship that is about making sure we are all putting kids first. It's a relationship that's positive, it's one that's constructive, and it's one that we hope will take some of the politics out of it in the long term. Thank you for that, CJ. Hello.
Hello. Peter Bernanke from Columbia River, Revelstoke, and congratulations on your victory.
Thank you, Peter.
I want to make a few comments. If we're giving out marks, you guys are doing good in some areas and lacking in others. So I think it's our opportunity to hear, and Merv and I, we come from Revelstoke, and it seems like we're neglected. Well, we have first of all, we have a NDP guy, and maybe he can't do much, but even though we have a...
Can you do something about that?
We're trying.
All right.
But what I'm saying, I don't want to be neglected just because we're punished because we have one in there. We want to get treated. It seems like we're not getting treated right, and I'm going to go right to the point with our road system. And it's not so much the bumpy roads. We're going to note it now is we got the bumpiest road in Canada, or second place, from Golden to Sycamoose. Or, now why I want to talk about it, in 20 years, we have one death a month. And it's not fair. We should be able to correct it and direct millions of dollars to help straighten this thing out. Like a lot of times we're working in an area, there's a siren going, and when the sirens and the first responders go out, it's not good news. So I want you guys to have a serious look, and let's say we cut that in half, maybe 6 people a year, and it's very serious, and I would like you guys to have a look at it, and I'm making a plea, and I want to take something back to our councillors and our mayor directly from you people that you're going to address it and put some effort in, and don't forget about us poor guys in Revelstoke. Thank you.
Thank you. Blair, do you want to speak to that one?
Well, just quickly, Premier, I mean, I think road safety is a primary focus for all of us, whether you're in Revelstoke or whether you're out in Kitimat or in Fort Nelson. So we're going to do what we can. Hundreds of millions of dollars have gone your way. I mean, I can think of the Kicking Horse Canyon. There's a number of things. But when we say that, we can never lose sight of the fact that can we do more and can we do better? Most definitely. I think it's fair to say we have to find a way to build this bridge, rural and urban. I mean, and I've been there and been part of it. I live in Dawson Creek. But I can tell you there's a real lack of understanding, I think, on a lot of our parts when we see, for instance, the Port Mann Bridge Highway 1 project. People in Dawson Creek say, Jesus, Blair, why are we doing that? What's it mean to us? You know, it means a great deal. The movement of goods and services and our Gateway program, it helps us all. But we can never lose sight of the fact, and I can tell you, I've already spoken with Christy and my colleagues, the reality is the resource industry is the economic backbone to our province's ability to deliver all of our programs. The only way that it's going to have a thriving, prosperous future is with the sound transportation network. We're going to continue. My predecessors have done a good job, and I'm going to do my best to carry that on. But we will never forget, whether it's Revelstoke or any part of rural British Columbia. That I'll assure you.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Blair. Microphone 2.
Good morning. Dr. Bill Ebert from Northern British Columbia. And I'm retired now after spending 45 years serving the public. But my question basically will be about BC Hydro, and I would like to direct it to Blair Lekstrom, because we need Site C. It's been delayed for years. Let's quit the delay, get at it. But also, Hydro should be going on a 50-year program. We have a tremendous asset in the north with hydroelectric power. Let's go on a very, very well-developed and well-planned procedure and go for the next 50 or 100 years on developing it, because that's important for all of you people down here and all of us in the north.
Thank you for that. I'm going to redirect that, if I may, to Rich Coleman, as the Minister responsible for BC Hydro.
Could try to give Blair some more airtime. I don't get that, you know what I mean?
Okay.
Site C has a new design. It's 1,100 megawatts. It's going to go into the next phase. We're going to get through the environmental assessment, our negotiations with First Nations communities. We're going to build Site C Dam in British Columbia because we need the power. It's the most economic power that we can get. It's clean, it's green, and it's good for BC, and it's billions of dollars of investment for jobs in the north. So it's going to go ahead.
Thank you, Rich.
Well, just, Bill, if it's any help, Bill, that's the same answer I would have gave.
Microphone 1.
Good morning, Premier. Irene Day from Vancouver Point Grey, and I'm so glad about the by-election results. I have a few comments. So more than 6 years ago, we approached the BC government with a strategy that if we treated HIV-infected individuals early, we would decrease significantly the incidence of HIV transmission. The HIV world didn't accept that very well and had huge doubts about this strategy, and the BC Centre for Excellence in HIV/AIDS received a great deal of criticism. So after a lot of work, we've had some successes. We've had WHO, UNAIDS, and China, to name a few, who have now adopted this Made in BC strategy of treatment as prevention. So the reason that BC is changing the way that the world is addressing this is because your government did this. And so it wouldn't have happened without that support. And because of 6 years ago you made that change in terms of buying into a concept that the rest of the world didn't believe in, we have changed the way the world is addressing HIV and AIDS. And many of the people are sitting on that stage today that had that impact. And as of this week, we've had from, The Economist has said, testing and preventing HIV/AIDS, at last, the good news. BC gets the credit. That's great. It is great. Also this week, the New York Times, early HIV strategy, early HIV therapy sharply curbs transmission. BC gets the credit. That's because of this government, and I want to thank you for that, because we are going to change it. Now, the sad thing is, this isn't happening in the rest of Canada. Only BC in Canada is showing a consistent decrease in HIV and AIDS. So we have some work to do with our country, but thank you for your help here in BC.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Microphone 2.
Hi, my name is Bijan Ahmadian from Point Grey. I just retired from serving as the president of AMS, UBC's Student Society, where we represent more than 48,000 students. And I wanted to talk about student issues. I've been elected at UBC year after year because I talk about three things when I don't go to students. They care about student housing. Right now, the demand is $2,500. They care about transportation. UPass is the most valuable asset students have. The third thing is that they care about the relationship between tuition and student financial aid. Now, let me be absolutely clear that we do not have a tuition crisis in British Columbia. We are in the middle of the pack. And as a law student, I pay half of the tuition that someone in Osgoode Hall pays. And I think I get better value for my money because UBC has the largest number of electives in the country at law school, and we're about to get a state-of-the-art facility. So great value for money. But when it comes to student financial aid, we pay the highest interest rate in the country. And that doesn't sit well with students. When you price yourselves in the middle of the pack, your consumers like it, but at an extreme, people don't like it. And every time the NDP leadership or MLAs come to our campus to talk to our students, the number one thing they talk about is how they're going to make the student financial aid more affordable. Now, in speaking with the MLAs and the ministers while I was the president, I learned that the government doesn't actually make money from lending us money, but it's the cost of providing that loan to us that is higher in BC somehow. So if there's a way to make that system more efficient and to advertise it properly to students at a time where we're trying to engage more students, I think this party could be really successful with young voters. And it has to be advertised a lot better. I think when UPass and the government leadership in saving the UPass was announced, it wasn't announced properly to students. If you ask the average students, they would give credit for the UPass to anyone but the government. So I think this issue needs to be looked at, the student financial aid, and should be advertised well to students.
Thank you for all those comments and questions. Thanks very much. Naomi Yamamoto.
Thank you. That's great comments, and I do understand, especially in the Lower Mainland, students attending university accommodations are a huge cost, and that's just the reality of real estate rental in BC, or in the Lower Mainland. UPass, this lady here, that's who really should get the credit. She really pushed for it. And it's a great program, and we have protected it. You talked about students and getting through their education. I think one of the things that we've done is we've made it, students are actually graduating faster now than they did in the 90s. So if we can make sure that the students are getting through the system, they have access to the system, and it is affordable, you're right, we have the fourth lowest tuition fees in Canada. But if we can get them through the system faster than they did in the 90s when they had the fixed, they froze the tuition rates, students were taking a lot longer, it was costing them a lot more. And I guess probably the most important thing is that investment in your education. If there isn't a job, if we don't have a strong economy, none of that matters. So that's what we're good at. That's what our record has been. And I think that with all the great choices that we've made in terms of kind of opening up education to the rural BC, so we've got the 7 new universities, we're making actually it more affordable so that people can study closer to home instead of having to come down to UBC. So I think we've done a lot of work. I'd love to talk to you afterwards and get into that more detail.
Thank you. Thank you, Naomi. Microphone 1, our very last question of the afternoon or the morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Ethan Huberman, Surrey White Rock. I would like to first say that the BC Liberal government, as long as I've known it, has done an excellent and an outstanding job of working with others. It's done an outstanding job of working with other provinces, as you've mentioned in the First, I think it started with Tilma, and then I think now it's extended with the Western Partnership. It's done an excellent job of working with other governments, including our federal government, for a very long time. And I would like my question is for our Minister of Finance, Kevin Falcon. And my question is, can you tell us, I know that in 2007 in the federal budget, I know that an extra $410 million was provided in additional federal funding for the South Fraser Perimeter Road. And my question to you is, how much federal funding so far, if you're aware of it, has been provided to British Columbia to help with that? Because, and not to belittle what our federal government has done, I know they've done a lot more with the Gateway Project and a lot of other great projects. So I'm not trying to diminish what our federal government has done.
Sure. So thank you for the question. It's been a few years since I was back in the transportation portfolio, but the federal government did make a substantial commitment to the South Fraser Perimeter Road, and we very much appreciate that. That was part of the Asia-Pacific Gateway Strategy, where they have worked very closely with us to make sure that we open up opportunities to move goods and trade throughout the Lower Mainland. A lot of people forget about things, and you know, they say, oh, well, if they're building this bridge and they're building this South Fraser, and why are they doing this? And no, you know, there's not a lot of people that step back and actually look at the bigger picture of what's happening. And Pat Bell commented on that a little bit earlier. There's a huge global shift that's taking place in trade patterns, and British Columbia just happens to be the only piece of real estate in Canada that is right on that gateway to North America for the Asia Pacific and vice versa. So we have this tremendous opportunity, but it will be opportunity unrealized unless we actually do something about it. And so the South Fraser Perimeter Road is part of that. The federal government is a major participant in that, which we very much appreciate. They're a major participant in another project we've got, which is providing rail crossings all the way from Delta to Langley, East Langley, to ensure that traffic can get across increasingly busy rail corridors. That is important for, you know, families and for making sure that people can move without having the trains interrupting traffic. So there's been, I think, some really good federal-provincial cooperation. I think that's always been a hallmark of our government. Whoever's in the federal government, we have always made an effort to work cooperatively, because at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is deliver benefits to all British Columbians. And I think by cooperating, we'll continue to do that. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Ethan. Thanks to all of you for being a part of this. I hope that many of you who didn't get to ask a question had some of them answered today. And many thanks to this incredibly bright, hard-working group you see here with me. I'm going to introduce each one of them and ask them to stand up, and we can cheer each of them on. Mary Polak, Mary McNeil, Kevin Falcon, Barry Penner, Harry Bloy, Ida Chong, Naomi Yamamoto, Shirley Bond, George Abbott, Rich Coleman, Blair Leckstrom, Don McRae, Terry Lake, Pat Bell, Steve Thompson, and Mr. Mike DeYoung. Ladies and gentlemen, your government.
And I would like to say on behalf of the membership, thank you to the Cabinet and to the Premier for taking the time to answer our questions.
Thank you.